For our final project, our theme is freedom and some of the different forms it takes in the literature we discussed in class.
Freedom can be found in both a physical and emotional sense. The Fall of the House of Usher is a Gothic story written by Edgar Allan Poe, in which a nameless narrator goes to visit an old friend and notes that his friend looks old and tired. He seems to be in a state of depression due to the fact that he seems to be tied to the house. After what seems to be an odd conversation, Usher gets more and more panicked until his sister Madeline shows up in the doorway wearing bloodied clothes. She falls forward onto Usher and dies. Through her death, Madeline Usher was freed not only from the physical confinement of a house, but also the emotional and mental torment both her and her brother seem to be in. In the yellow wallpaper, the narrator has been put on bed rest by her husband, who's a doctor, because he believes she has hysteria, a mental disorder that we now know is postpartum depression. The first quote shows that the narrator seems to feel imprisoned in her own house. As the story moves forward, the narrator gets progressively worse and starts to believe that there is a woman who is trapped inside the wallpaper. After the isolation persists, she is driven into further madness and strips the wallpaper off the wall. The second quote shows that the narrator identifies the woman trapped in the wallpaper as herself. By ripping off the wallpaper, she feels like she has, in a sense, been freed from the confines of her own bedroom walls. In The Minister's Black Veil, a minister covers his face with a black veil with no explanation to the townspeople. He refuses to take it off or explain the purpose of it, so the townspeople begin to feel frightened of him and avoid speaking or looking at him. By looking at the quote above, you can tell that the minister believes that wearing the veil frees him from his sin. So, from his perspective, the people that have been judging him are still tied to their sin and therefore in captivity. This quote could also relate to finding freedom in accepting your personal imperfections, thus breaking free from society confines of what physical imperfections should be or how they should look.
While some would describe the soul as an immortal entity trapped within a finite space, thus limited in its personal freedom, Whitman understood that the soul was not just a spirit confined to one point in time. As he said, "I pass death with the dying and birth with the new-washed babe, and am not contained between my hat and boots, and pursue manifold objects, no two alike and every one good, the earth good, and the stars good, and their adjuncts all good. I am not an earth nor an adjunct of the earth. I am the mate and companion of people, all just as immortal and fathomless as myself. They do not know how immortal, but I know." This quote can be seen as a description of the human mind and soul's untethered freedom to cross space and time, the ability of the soul to be at once all things to all people and not bound by the confines of earth. We often define freedom within its own set of rules. These can be both physical and transcendent. You are free to do this, but not that. You are free to say this, but not that. However, Emerson believed that freedom, in its most basic sense, applied to any and all aspects of the human condition. To believe our own thought, to believe that what is true for you in your private heart is true for all men, this is genius. Speak your latent conviction, and it shall be the universal sense. For the inmost in due time becomes the outmost, and our first thought is rendered back to us by the trumpets of the last judgment. This quote represents freedom of expression and the freedom to speak what is on one's heart and mind. This idea bridges the gap between the physical and spiritual freedoms of mankind. Bradstreet knew that the flesh and the spirit were constantly at war for their own freedoms, to what each wanted. While the spirit wanted the freedom to pursue things of the spirit, the flesh wanted the freedom to pursue things of the flesh. Take thy fill, earth hath enough of what you will, then let not go what thou mayest find, for things unknown, only in mind. In this quote, flesh can be seen as showing spirit the carnal freedom the earth brings. The earth has plenty of its goods, and the flesh is free to do what it pleases.